Hey folks, welcome to another video on this series on ASP.NET Core from zero to overkill. In this episode I'm going to talk a bit about configuration in ASP.NET Core, as you might suspect from the page I have opened. In this episode, much like the previous episodes and maybe the next couple of them, we have not been making great progress on the reference application, mostly because I think these are important topics that are core to understanding the whole application, and it would be hard to have them all in one video while developing the application. So I thought it would be better if I just made some simple demos with these concepts, so when we need them in the future, and they will be really needed along the way, it's easier to understand in the context, having some understanding of the individual parts. So this will be another one of those. The project won't really go forward that much in this episode or at all, but we'll see how configuration works, the basics, not really going into too much detail, but the detail that's needed most of the times, at least in my opinion. So let's get started talking about configuration. So in previous versions of ASP.NET, configuration was basically done using a web.config file and some config files at the IIS configuration level and some machine config files. In ASP.NET Core, it's really changed. We still have support for files, not web.config files, but mostly JSON is the usual way to go, but there are others. I can show you over here in the documentation. They talk about it. So for instance, ini files, JSON, XML. But besides these files, we now have more stuff to do out of the box, to use out of the box. So we could use all of these. These are like providers that are available out of the box with the ASP.NET Core. We can build our own providers. In this episode, I'm just going to use the most common, I think. So I'm going to mention like the files, like I said, environment variables, command line argument, and also touch the subject on user secrets for development mode, and of course go for the documentation to see more details on this. I'll just go with the things I think are the most usual and more important to know in this regard, and what I've used in past projects. So other people might have other needs, but in past projects these seem to be the most common ones. To understand from where are these configurations coming from, let's maybe start from kind of the beginning and building up on some knowledge we had from previous videos. So in the program, you might remember this, we have this create default builder. If we go see the source code for this create default builder, we can see that it configures some defaults regarding configuration as well. So if you check here, there's this add.json file. So by default, this default builder will find an app.settings.json and also an app.settings.environment.name.json. So we can have overrides depending on the environment we're in. If in development, it will also register user secrets, environment variables, and command line arguments. So these are the defaults like I mentioned, but we can configure more. The order by which they are configured is important because the configurations are like a hierarchical. So when we have this app settings JSON, if we imagine we are in development mode, the development settings will override the JSON, the default ones, but just the ones that are declared. If, for instance, some are not declared, the ones that are remain. So imagine if we have in the app settings a setting like a key, like some key 1, set to 1. If then we have an environment variable with the same name, it will override the one app settings, but we'll see a demo of this. And the same for command line arguments and that sort of thing. So it's not magic from where the arguments come. I will not use this code, but as I'm using Create Default Builder, it's used by default. Now let's start with adding some configurations. So I'll create a file, JSON file called app settings.json. And now I'm going to put here something not too complicated, but enough so we can see some interesting things. And another key. Okay, this is done. Now in the program we have nothing else to do, but we go to the startup, and to use the configuration we can add a constructor that receives an I configuration. Okay, let's set here a breakpoint and let's see this working. Okay, now we can see the config, and we can see we have 5 providers, those that are configured. We can see here by the name, chain configuration provider, JSON provider, environment variables, command line provider. So this chain provider, I don't even know what this is. Okay, but it does something with the others, probably just to simplify. So it just got the environment variables. It thinks it are important. Now we go for this. This is the JSON configuration provider, and we have our configuration that we put in the file. One interesting thing to notice is that the levels appear here separated by colons. So some root, some subroot, some key, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The same for the others. So if we want to override this with a command line argument or an environment variable, this would be the way to do it. Pass the whole name like this with the sections separated by the colons. So let's go next. This is the other JSON provider for the development or staging or production, the environment based configuration file that we didn't create yet. So we can see here no data. If you go to the environment variables configuration provider, there are a lot of variables, so are the ones that are available on my computer, so a lot. And command line, I didn't pass any argument, so nothing here. Okay, so let's stop. Just so to be interesting, let's change here the configuration and then the runtime argument, which will be some root dot some subroot and command line key, and then we will pass okay. Now let's debug this and see the differences. Okay, something's not right. What did I miss? Unknown option. Let me see. Oh, okay, wrong place. It's not here, it's here. It's not something for .NET Core, but something for our application. Let's go again. Hopefully it will work. Nice. Okay, we're here again. If we go to config, providers, let's go straight to command line, and now we have 2 arguments. Okay. Maybe that's not the correct way to pass them. It's the first time I'm using this rider functionality. Let's see how this works. We'll get back to this, but I think it won't work because I'm passing the arguments wrong. Let me add here a directory, and I'll call it demo again. This will be deleted eventually. And I'll create a class, some root configuration, and another class, some subroot configuration, and over here we'll have some key, and okay, if you are recognizing this, I'm creating a POCO to keep our configurations. So we have different ways to access configuration. So like we saw earlier, I'll just do it here because okay, I'll do it in the config. We could do something like for instance int and say some root, some subroot, then some key. Let's put a breakpoint here. Let's go. If we go see value, it's the one we are expecting. So this is a way to get values, but it's not a really pretty way to do it, because we want to use this in some places and we don't want to know the full path on the configuration structure. So a nicer way to do it, and recommended, is we can go into the dependency injection and do something like services configure, and then some root configuration, and then here we go to config, get section, and say okay. And this will lead us to a pattern in ASP.NET Core, the IOptions pattern. So what we can do after doing this is we can go, for instance, to the controller and inject IOptions, some root configuration, and that is okay. I don't want the IOptions, so remove this, and we go here and put that value. Okay, now let me put a breakpoint here, and let's debug it. Okay, now groups, and we are on our breakpoint, and now we can see on the config this is a lot. So we have here the config, and it's working. Even the command line key that seemed that wouldn't work worked. Okay, nice. So as you can see, we now have our POCO injected. So on a startup, I used configure, said what was the type of the configuration, and told it what was the section, or got the section from which it would use the values, and those values are put in an object of this type. And then in the controller, I injected it like this, so an IOptions of that type, and we have everything here. Now let's make something interesting with the environment. Let me stop the debugging, and let's add another file, another JSON file. Call it app settings.development.json. Okay, and let me just copy this here. I'll remove this and keep the sum key, but with a different set of values because of reasons. Okay, now let's just run this again. If you notice, when this starts, we're in the development mode, mainly because of this. Stop this. Let me just show you, because in this properties file there's a launch settings.json, which by default has this ASP.NET Core environment development. If we change this, this will change. This is basically for development mode, this launch settings JSON, we normally in a production environment, this would be an environment variable set on the operating system or the Docker container or whatever. In this case, because it's like a profile, when using this from development, this is used like with the IIS Express. If you notice in IIS settings, this doesn't appear anymore because it should be an environment variable. But okay, so given this, we're in development mode, so this should be used, this app settings development JSON. So let's reload this, stop on the breakpoint again, step this over, now go to config, and so another key is the same, command line key is the same because it's being passed by writer when starting the application, and some key has changed because it is using the app settings value just for this key. The others, as it's not changed, it's not overridden, so it keeps using this one. Okay, so we've seen how this hierarchy works. I could of course do the same thing with command line. I could pass an argument on the command line with this name, and it would override the JSON because of the order we saw here. So JSON file is first, then secrets, then environment variables, then command line. If you want a different order, you can do it. This is just the default one. Okay, so let's go into the next subtopic. So this IOptions stuff is great, but it has some problems and some advantages. As you can see here, this reload on change argument, it's nice. That means that if we change the JSON file, it will be reloaded, so we can do changes on the fly. If that's really important, I'm not really sure, because we rarely do that, and maybe an application restart just to change something is not that bad. Maybe it is, depends on the situation, I guess. As always, it depends. But it introduces some problems, and there's this nice article on this. I will link it. If I don't, please remember me. So the main problem is that we're getting a dependency on these IOptions. It's not that bad when we're doing this like in the controller in the ASP.NET Core application, because it already has dependencies on this. But probably this won't be the norm. The norm will be to want these configurations on some classes, not controllers, that probably are in different NuGet packages, and so it would force us to have a dependency on Microsoft extensions options. If we want the hot reload capability, by all means, but in other cases this is not that good, because we're adding a dependency on something, and if we want to use that package with another technology, maybe we don't want to use ASP.NET Core, maybe we want just a console application and don't want a dependency on this, we want to use other web frameworks, it's not that nice to be dependent on these IOptions, and it's doable. Like you can see here in this article, and I will copy paste some code in a moment, but in the meantime, so what would be ideal is, instead of these IOptions, we received directly this. So we are not dependent on these options, and this can be done easily. We go back to our startup, and instead of registering this like this, we want something like not configure but add singleton, and we want to put our configuration there. So something like so we want to register this. Okay, but this is just an empty object. What we can do is you go to config, get section, some root, and then bind to our configuration. What this will do is populate this object that's already created and has these getters and setters. I haven't really tried without them, but they are probably needed. So, and now adding a singleton. So in the groups controller, now the config will work just like this without needing a dependency on IOptions. Let's see what happens. The breakpoint. Let's see if this works. And we're here. Next. Config. And there they are. So it's working like before, but without the dependency on IOptions, which is nice. There are more ways to do this, but this is a simple one, I guess. So this is nice, but it's kind of ugly to have this here in the startup class. Even if we move it to another place, it's not that good to be doing this all the time. So this is where this article comes in with a nice idea, which is basically just do an extension method that simplifies this. So I'm just going to steal this to show into my service collection extensions and add this method. Okay, now let me explain what's going on. If you notice, this is basically the same. The bind at singleton is just doing it in a way that will be easier to configure. So the type of configuration which needs to be a class, and it has a parameterless constructor, so it can be instantiated like this and then be bound. Exactly the same code I put in the startup class, but generic. So now we can go to the startup, comment this, and I'll do something that will look like this, but work like this. So services dot configure Poco, some root configuration, and let's just copy this. Okay, so it looks exactly like the first one, but will work like the second one. So let's see this running again. Yeah, let's go back here, reload, go, config, still working, much nicer. So it looks exactly like the first one, simple, clean. It could be improved probably. In a way we didn't need to do this, but this is good enough, I think, at least for now. It's comparable to the normal way to do it, but without the IOptions. Now, if you need the IOptions, it's up to you to know, but most of the time I think this is nicer. This is a nicer way to use the options way of working, but without having that tight coupling to that package. So we don't need to add that dependency to our other packages that might need some configurations. Let's wrap up this intro to configuration with secrets, development time secrets. Secrets are a nice thing for development time because it avoids we check in secrets into source control. So normally in production, probably the way secrets are passed onto the application are environment variables, maybe some vault solutions like Azure Vault key, or like whatever the name of the service is called, or other things like HashiCorp's Vault as well. But in dev, it's nice to have our secrets integrate with the configuration in the nicer way, and not writing down our secrets in the app settings. Then we commit to GitHub and everybody knows our secrets. So we can go here to configuration, and there is something around Azure Key Vault, like I was saying. But if we find the secrets, over here, secrets. One thing to notice, like this is mentioning here, is that these secrets are not encrypted. It's just a file on the disk, but it's not on the folder of the project, so it won't go to source control by accident. It's put in some folder, I don't remember, like this, Microsoft user secrets, user secret ID, and then a JSON file, and it's clear text there, so it's not super secure. It's just to store our development secrets. So how can we use this? We go back here, terminal. For starters, and it's talked about right at the beginning, we need to add a user secrets ID to the CS proj, so that it can match the CS project to the secrets file. So I have already generated a GUID. Let me go here, edit, just copy this here. Okay, so now we have a GUID. Now we can add to the console and start using this secret. So I'm going to do a .NET user secrets and set demo secrets some key and then I don't know 02468 because reasons set. Okay, now we can use the command .NET user secrets list. Okay, and then it will list our secrets. We can change it again and list it. It's changed, and we can remove it. Remove. We list. We have nothing for this application. Okay, so we have this secret. And now if I go back to Firefox, so we can see the source code, you can see that add user secrets, it's here. So we don't need to do anything in the startup to add these secrets. It's added here, and as you might expect, being it before the environment variables and after the JSON file, we can read it exactly the same way as other configurations. So okay, Rider is happy now. So we can go to startup, or better, I'll create a new class called demo secrets configuration, and then add a prop int some key, which maps to the secret I created. Now let me just get this here, go into startup and do exactly the same as this. Services, configure POCO, do this, copy this one, change it, demo secrets. Okay, now let's inject this in the controller just to see if it works. Okay. Let's put the breakpoint here. Oops. Okay. Go. You're here. Go here. Refresh. Secrets, open, and the key that we added in the command line, it's over here. So working in a POCO as expected. So why is this nice? We can use this like to store like OpenID Connect, OAuth tokens, and connection strings, stuff like that, and not be committed to source control by accident, which is nice. But even though we are using that secret, the configuration is just as the other. We use the same way, which is really nice. The code is clean. We don't need to do something weird just because we are using secrets. and probably in production, if we wanted the code to remain like this and we are not using the environment variables, we would just use another provider. For instance, like they mentioned in the documentation, Azure Key Vault configuration is probably a secure way. If you want to use another one, if there isn't a provider, you can do one. So seems a nice way to do stuff. In for the application, it's a configuration like the others, but it's provided in a different way. So I think that's about it for this episode. Let me check my sheets. Yeah, it's about it for this episode. Hopefully you now understand the basics of the configuration. I don't think much more advanced is needed, besides probably the secrets in production stuff. But this is nice. This is a nice intro for what we are going to do in future episodes. In the next one, probably in the next couple, we'll continue this core stuff theme, and then with all this knowledge under the hood, we can finally start coding our reference project to be more productive and for everyone to understand what's going on without having all the subjects mixed in the same video. So hopefully it was useful, and I'll see you back in the next one. See yous!